All right. Hello, this is Krista with thelifeinprogress.ca, and I get to speak with Mara Glatzel today about deepening self-trust. So, hi, an official hi and welcome, Mara.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
By the way, I met you, not met, but I found you because of my beautiful friend Catriella of newmoonhakomi.com, I think is her URL. But Catriella is my friend, and she told me about your work. So that's how I first encountered it, I don't know, a few years ago.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so sweet of Catriella. And I've been a fan of your work for a long time, so I was so excited to hear from you.
Nice. Okay, so Mara, MSW, so Masters of Social Work,
Hmm.
is an intuitive coach, writer, and podcast host. She's a needy human who helps other needy humans stop abandoning themselves and start reclaiming their humanity through embracing their needs and honoring their natural energy cycles. I love that so much that I could reread it multiple times. Her superpower is saying what you need to hear when you need to hear it, and she's here to help you believe in yourself as much as she believes in you. You can find her over at maraglatzel.com. So, Mara, to get started, would you share your pronouns? And then I would love to just ask you a question to get to know you better. And first, your pronouns, please.
My pronouns are she, her. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. So, Mara, what do you absolutely love about yourself, and where have you struggled with self-trust? We'll just dive on in.
Oh, yeah. I feel like maybe those questions are together.
I'm
What I really, what I really love about myself is my tenacity. And I am somebody who is able to craft a pretty large vision for what I want to create, or what I'm, helping collaborate to create on different fronts. And I have both the ability to create and hold a big vision, and also I'm like really really detail oriented and organized. And for a long time, I felt like this made me be way too much. And I think that this really contributed to my lack of self trust, because I was just like, when I'm kind of operating on all cylinders, I'm a lot of a person. And so I spent much of my life toning myself down, and kind of piecing myself out so that other people weren't overwhelmed, or I wasn't talking too loud or too excited. And the more that I have walked that back and rebuilt my relationship with myself, the more that I enjoy those aspects of myself. And, you know, mostly I'm surrounded by people who enjoy them as well, but also don't take it personally or try not to take it personally when I'm not for everyone else.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Um, I am still very much, and maybe this will be a lifelong journey for all of us, but I'm still really very much, I think, learning how to show up as all of me at once. I think I've loved myself well for quite a few years, but I'm noticing I just am still learning how to remove myself from places where I feel like I have to be masked, or I'm not allowed to be all of me, or I have to be a little bit dimmer because I might make you feel something that you don't want to feel, and I don't want to do it anymore. And I think maybe there will be a time where I can more easily navigate relationships and just it won't bother me. But right now I notice when I feel like I'm hiding parts of me, and I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's a commitment I've made to myself. And so I will, whatever that looks like, remove myself from those relationships or whatever. And I think it's important work.
Oh, yeah. And it's so, I mean, it's going to be a lifelong journey for me as well. And it's so challenging. This is one of the reasons why I started doing the work that I do with people around their needs and really about belonging to themselves and self partnership, because I became acutely aware of how much I had trespassed against myself in order to, what I see now as kind of fake belong,
Yeah. Hmm.
because it felt it was had the trappings of belonging, right? I may be invited to things, or have people texting me, or whatever these things are that we associate with belonging, but it always rang so hollow, and I constantly had that disconcerting feeling of I may be here, I may be invited to the event, but I'm so lonely.
Yeah.
Nobody knows me, and I didn't really know myself because it seemed like really inconvenient to get to know myself. And yeah, I hated that lonely feeling. But it's really scary to bring more of yourself into your life and to find that, I mean, there are people who have not been for that, for me, and that was a pretty painful lesson to move through.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to get to the next question shortly, but I do have an impromptu question for you. And you mentioned that loneliness. So would that be one of the telltale signs for you that you are um, rejecting or hiding or somehow I can't remember the word you used specifically, but like rejecting yourself or something like that for belonging? Is that sense of sort of, even if you're surrounded by people, this deep loneliness? Would that be a sign, or is there something else that you can think of that would be like your
Yeah.
warning flag?
Yeah. The loneliness for sure. But the before the loneliness shows up, I start to notice that I'm having a lot of anxiety, and I have anxiety just generally speaking, but a lot of like micromanaging myself, and it'll show up in believing that there's one right and perfect thing to say.
Okay.
And then maybe I've said it, and yay, good for me. That's like, there's like a moment of respite before the next opportunity to show that, whatever, I'm good comes up. Um, but more often, when that opportunity is missed, it shows up in really devastating self-talk. And that's when I notice, that I am in an experience where I believe there's a certain way that I need to be in order to be safe and in order to belong. And it feels really weighty and important to be that way. And so I'm putting all of this pressure on myself, and it manifests in second guessing everything and worrying. And, sometimes it won't happen in the moment. I won't notice, but then, hours later, I'll be perseverating over one like slightly awkward thing that I said, or,
Mhm.
just really going over the details again, 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 and again. And that's a surefire sign for me that I don't feel comfortable showing up as myself in that relationship. And sometimes it's possible to turn that around, and sometimes that's a sign that that's not a relationship that I want to prioritize, or put my energy towards.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to cheat and sneak in one more question. I don't think I've seen this in your work, any Enneagram talk. Do you know by chance your dominant Ennea type, or how you lead
Yeah,
in
I'm a 3.
a 3?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have a like in this season of your life, do you feel like you pick up sort of that wing, that 2 or the 4 at all, or?
It's funny because I'm always expecting myself to pick up a 2 wing, um, because there's so many things about it that feel so. I work with a lot of caregivers. Some things ring true, but every time I sort of double down and do any sort of like deepening into the work, it's always really solidly 3.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just always something that's been really interesting to me. And I think that I am part of that, like, people pleasing edge. It's like I am more competitive than I allow myself to be. I'm, more yeah, I think that there's some stuff that shows up in there where it's like how I might be has been dulled by how I've made myself be in order to belong, if that makes sense. But I do feel like a 3.
Okay, thanks. Um, so I do love that you own your neediness, that you call yourself a needy human. And it makes me think it's different, but I feel like this morning I was like, I need to somehow get this on my website. Like, if you're a socially awkward human, like, come, as you are, because I'm like, because lots of times my guests are like, I feel really awkward. But I'm like, I'm just like awkward always. So it's like, you are welcome here. Like all the anxious people and highly sensitive and socially awkward and all the things, it's like, you're my people. So, okay, that's not the question.
I love it though.
I would love it if you would share a bit of your journey from self-abandonment to self-partnership. Those are words that you use, I think, on your Instagram bio. And then also, what are a few of the life-transforming truths that you've picked up along the way?
Yeah. So I'll say that I started this journey in a like true hole of self-abandonment where I was so burnt out. I was so disconnected from my body. I was so disconnected from a reality where my t- I that I even had control over my time. Um, my life was very much run by what was the right and best thing to do and how fast could I do that. And it, it was almost sustainable for me for a time because I have a pretty high capacity, both to know what's expected of me and also to deliver that. But what was happening underneath the surface was that I was really masterful at motivating myself through fear and through shame and kind of keeping myself in line by being really cruel to myself. And so this relationship, and meanwhile, waiting, like doing a lot of self help work and waiting until the day where I just loved myself and thinking like, okay, this is what everybody talks about. It's like I keep myself busy doing all the things, and someday a like self-love epiphany is going to bop me on the head, and at that point taking care of myself will be easier, so I'll just like wait until that epiphany occurs. And um I would like to say I figured some of that out before my burnout really began to be troublesome for me, but I didn't. It was, I kind of ran myself into the ground and to a point where I was really had to pull back because I was not capable of continuing the way that I had been. And I was in grad school and I getting my MSW, and I realized I didn't want to be a social worker, which was kind of devastating to have put a ton of money and a ton of time. And it was beyond that. It was like I had to come home and tell my partner, who we were about to get married, that she didn't really know me because I just started to realize, wow, the way that I'm showing up in the world, in my relationships, in my jobs, in the things I'm saying yes to, are there's so much of a distance between, not even between my capacity, between me even acknowledging that I was a person who had a capacity. And so I started I started really slowly. And also I bought into that whole diet mentality thing where, it's like somebody out there is going to have like a 10 easy steps to being in relationship with myself. And if I just found that person and gave them my money, then like, thank you. Great, easy button. And so resisted this idea of like stacking like one moment of self-connection, one moment of self-connection. And that was really the way to to foster this relationship with myself over the course of my life, because I kind of thought, I'm burnt out. This is a really significant situation. I'll do this work. I'll heal myself. I'll get to the other side of it and like back to business.
Mhm.
Um, but when when I started to unpack some of this, my entire life as I knew it really crumbled. Um, and I realized I had not ever gotten to know myself. So I had not made any decisions about my life that were rooted in truth about what I wanted or who I was. And I was really surprised by that. Um, so I started by really walking that piece back by getting to know myself again. And something as simple as, what do I like to eat? What do I want to wear? Do I think that this is aesthetically pleasing or this? But really just starting to ask myself those kinds of questions and beginning to honor my needs was such an important part of this. Though I didn't totally realize until I became a parent, how important that was going to be for me. Because once my first child was born, I was so exhausted that my neediness like reached fever pitch. And I was like, wow, okay. Even though I had kind of done many years of work to build this relationship with myself up until that point, when I was so exhausted, I was like, wow, okay, even still, less, slower, more intentional. Even still, I need to learn how to ask for help. I need to um, let other people support me. Uh, so it's been like the onion that just keeps,
Mhm.
even still this year, the pandemic has brought all of these new lessons to me in terms of, what I need and how I want to navigate the world and navigate my work and navigate my relationships. My kids are growing up now, and that's what I love about this work is that it is a true relationship that you're having with yourself, and you're going to have it over the course of your entire life. There's nowhere fast that you need to go to.
Mm.
There's no getting to the other side of it. Like this is it.
Yeah.
And relaxing into that has been really spacious actually, and knowing like there's not a rush.
Yeah.
Um, and it's taken a lot of, it's taken years to get to that point. So and it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I really relate to that. Like I've shared with my community that, for 2 years, like in my emails, I'm like, and I'm working on releasing again. I'm like, I've been saying this for 2 years, but it's just like deeper and deeper, more and more. I'm just like still doing the work. And the I shared just recently, at least I'm not resenting it anymore. Like for the past 2 years, for much of it, I was like, God, like I'm angry and I'm frustrated and I'm impatient and all these things. And now I'm just like, here I am, just, this is just it. And,
Mhm.
just, I do believe and try to practice seasonal living. And I feel like it is a more expansive and gentle and compassionate way of being. And it's the knowledge that, yeah, this relationship with ourselves really grows richer and deeper over time. But like you said, it's not about a rush or an end game at all. It's like, this is the work. This is it.
Mhm.
So right now I get to choose how I want to be and how to treat myself. And I love it, and it's freeing. It's hard work also, some seasons more than others, but I do think it's really challenging, like that concept for people who are kind of just at the start, don't you think? Like if they're at the place where, could you please just tell me the 7 steps? And it's hard because like, yeah, I too spent years looking for the perfect 7 steps and trying really hard. Um, so I don't think I have this written into a question elsewhere. So I do want to ask here. So that person who just is sort of at that beginning of the journey where they don't really for sure even know what that might look, sound, or feel like to begin a relationship of self-trust. Are there any, like a couple concrete ideas? Like I know it's just like one step at a time and one little like Am I thirsty? Go get myself water. Oh, I have to pee. You're allowed to go pee and not wait for 30 minutes for some reason. We all do that.
Mhm.
Like, can you think of a couple more ideas of like, how would you encourage somebody to just start practicing?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think that, something that's so important is meeting yourself where you're at, and not skipping over the frustration or the grief that shows up sometimes at the beginning of this, right? So, especially if we've been in pursuit of that like magic thing, um, there's a lot of grief wrapped up in it not existing. Um, I had a lot banked on that idea that at some point I would figure it out and it would be easier. And I think that so so I'll say that acknowledging however it is that you feel and validating that is such an important piece to developing self-trust. And so I think that it can look like taking the time to check in with yourself, asking yourself how you feel, um, asking yourself how you feel in whatever way feels accessible to you. Sometimes I like to use a feelings wheel to expand my vocabulary around what a feeling is and, different manifestations of feelings. Sometimes that doesn't feel accessible, and I'll start with my body. I'll think, I'm dehydrated or I'm tired, or it feels a little bit more tangible to check in with my body.
Mhm.
So, checking in with yourself in whatever way is possible, and being patient, because a lot of times when we're at the beginning of this conversation with ourselves, like I said, what do you need? And you said nothing. So I tried, no, like forget it. Um, when it's like if you've been ignoring your body, if you've been ignoring yourself for a long time, it's just like a friend that you haven't been calling. There's a period of time where, they might be giving you the silent treatment, and you get to be patient, and you get to kind of muck around and work it out. And again, not to skip over that piece or to assume that you're doing it wrong or it's just not available to you, um, but instead to be as open to receiving that information as possible. And sometimes, we need what we don't expect to need. We feel feel things that we don't expect to feel. And so we may be, I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, but I always think about this, like the scene in the first book where he's getting the Hogwarts invitations, and they're just like flying everywhere. And I think about how sometimes like we're looking through this teeny tiny little mail slot, and this specific invitation may not be coming through the slot, but behind us, it's like this comical, there's like invitations flying in the air everywhere. And so widening our scope a little bit to catch some of that information that might be going on that might be different than like the one specific thing that we're looking for.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, just validating those feelings as they show up. Um,
Because there
and
will
then,
be a lot of
yeah,
feelings if we're willing to.
yeah,
Yeah. And it can be scary. And I loved how you mentioned do what feels safe or accessible, because also that is so important, or else our nervous systems will just be like, nope, shut down, run,
hmm
too hard, too scary. So,
yeah. Well, and challenging that assumption that we're problems that need to be fixed. So we need these big, fancy, complicated systems that somebody else is going to teach us. Versus that being with ourselves, validating how we feel, being in conversation with ourselves over the course of the day. Ultimately that's the thing. And doing what is doable and letting that be enough. Those are the things that are going to rebuild that self-trust. But it requires contending with a lot of the messages that we have been taught and sold about, what it means to do a good job, even as it relates to your self-care or your,
mhm.
whatever that might be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think I was listening maybe to you on a podcast, an older one, and you were saying, I don't remember the details at all, but it was on this topic, and it was like something like maybe, my self-care today is drink a glass of water. Like it wasn't that, but it was something like it was just small and that was enough. And that's very challenging, isn't it? To ego, to all, and then I, I'm in a, I don't know how to describe it anymore. I'm just sort of like coming out of a winter season in the very, very beginning of spring, so to speak, but still in trauma therapy, dealing with grief and loss and pretty searing pain. And a lot of the people that I work with, they have their therapists and all the important people in their life supporting them. And also they're in community with me and we're doing some work together. But it's like we're walking through some hard stuff. And I'm like, sometimes literally what we need to do is remember to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough. And sometimes when the world feels like it's crashing down on us and everything is dark and we're spiraling into despair, the best thing we can do is either text a friend and tell them what's happening and then get into bed and just Netflix until you sleep or something. Like that's what loving yourself looks like. And I think we need more of this real talk, frankly. And I'm not interested in so I'm pretty good about like tuning out all that noise that I just find so simplistic and unhelpful. But I do think that many, many people are not hearing enough that loving ourselves, depending on the season of life, can be just, did you drink water today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my number one way that I'm caring for myself over the course of the last 3-4 months has been really focusing on my blood sugar management. And, you know, something that's been showing up in this like pandemic space, my kids were home. My work has been really busy. Is that I was just not eating consistently over the course of the day. And I was drinking a lot of coffee and I was kind of just not hungry. And, that something that is that simple, but also I wasn't doing it, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
And I was setting myself up to feel so chaotic inside because I wasn't eating breakfast or I was, having this long stretch from breakfast until dinner or, right? And so I think that sometimes my clients will say to me, Mara, like not with the water, not with the food, not with the rest, not with whatever, like, but are you doing it?
Yeah. It's just
Because
foundational. It's just
we
the
need it.
base. Yeah. Yeah.
And we
Is
cycle in and out of it, depending
yeah.
on the season of life that we're in. And this
Mhm.
past year has really had many of us in, what is your kind of worst case scenario response like? And becoming intimately aware of how we may or may not be supporting ourselves in that space of grief or profound uncertainty or how resilient we might be when our life gets completely upended. And
Mhm.
what I have found is that a lot of us haven't really thought about that, right, until those moments happen. And building this relationship with yourself and starting to kind of get into understanding the flow of those really foundational pieces can be such a support when you need them most.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So so a quick question. So for me, for instance, little routines or rhythms that ground me, they hold me fast in the storm. So like a very accessible, portable morning and evening routine. And I say portable because it's like when the whole world is turned upside down, that routine needs to be simple enough that it can come with me. Or when I travel for fun or whatever, I like to be able to bring that with me because it's really anchoring for me as a highly sensitive person. Excuse me. So little things like that, I find that if we can kind of build those before the storm, those actually, they seem so simple, but they actually can be quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find that? Do you have the little
Yeah.
rhythms or, yeah?
Yeah. I find that those simple ways of, I like to think about it like, I love that portable, such a great idea. Um, yeah, that concept of like scaffolding. So I'll have like a scaffolding for something that I can then customize to whatever the situation needs. That's why I like the daily check-in, because it's like it meets me wherever I'm at. Um, or a practice that it's like the practice is the container, and then you can put in the container whatever it is that is needed in the moment. And
Right,
this misconception that it needs to be complicated, because what so many of us are aching for is for the volume to be turned down
right.
and for things to be kept really easy to digest, really simple. I have two little kids, a 1-year old and a 4-year old, and so I'm really lucky to get to see the impact of a very kind of steady schedule on two little humans every single day. And it just never ceases to amaze me. It's like, I need that too. As an adult human, I want to know when it's going to be dinner time. I want to know when it's going to be bedtime. I want there to be a rhythm to the day that I can come to depend on. And,
Yeah.
I wasn't raised like that. And for me, that just the lack of previewing, the lack of knowing how my day was going to go was so chaotic and scary for me. And so I try to create that for my kids. Like, bedtime is a thing that happens at the same time every single day. And you know, I just see the beauty and the kind of flourishing that's able to happen when we all are moving through our day knowing like, okay, this is when we eat. This is when we just got a dog. This is when we walk the dog. This is when we go outside. This is when we watch some TV, whatever it might be. And I think that kind of just daily container too is so soothing for me.
Yeah, I would agree. As long as there's freedom and flexibility within, but I've got these anchor points and they
Yeah.
really help calm anxiety and help me be more present and enjoy like work and play and all of that because my brain doesn't have to be sorting through, well, what's next? And like, what am I going to make for supper? And like, well, all the things, right? I can just be. so,
Hmm.
so, I want to talk. So let's move on here. I believe that truth telling breaks shame and births freedom in our lives. So it's something that I just one of my core beliefs, and it really helps anchor my work. And that self trust can only take root and thrive when we're willing to tell the truth. And that means to ourselves above all. So I think first we practice telling the truth to ourselves, and then slowly we build up that muscle or the courage or our voice and practice in other places. So being human is hard work sometimes, and rather than owning our stories, asking for help, or showing up to do hard things, we might want to run, numb, hide under the covers, or stay down in the muck when we stumble. And by the way, no judgment, because I really think that all of us as humans, we run, numb, hide under the covers, and sometimes stay down in the muck for a while. But you say, Mara, I believe you are allowed to start again whenever you need to, mid morning, mid bite, whenever the mood strikes. I'd love to hear more about why this idea is so important as we build self trust. And what does it have to do with truth telling or not? So I'm thinking it does, but so this idea of just pick ourselves up, start again mid breath, mid word, mid sentence, mid bite, whatever. What's the relationship to self trust and or truth telling in your perspective?
Yeah. So this is a great question. There's so many layers to it.
Yes.
Uh, so I think that each and every one of us is the only person who knows when we need to slow down, hide out, numb out, climb and stay kind of like, mucking around in the muck. And that is a really important part of our cycle, actually. It's almost like pre contemplation. Um, and so where I think the self-trust piece and the truth piece comes in here is being able to discern for ourselves when we are hiding out and when we are giving ourselves that respite or giving ourselves that space. And this is something that's so tricky because if you don't have that self-trust built up, it can feel really scary because you don't want to get it wrong. And, you know, you think like, oh, well, I have things to do and I don't want to indulge myself, though I would go on record saying, please indulge yourself. I don't want to indulge myself or just, mug around if it's not really necessary. But I also don't feel ready. And part of being in relationship with ourselves and fostering a really strong internal connection has to do with asking these kinds of questions like, hey, what am I actually doing here? And for me, I'm not that concerned. You're in your bed with your blankets over your head because you're scared. Fine. I spent much of today. I have a really big announcement coming out later this week that I was like, wow, this is really exciting and also really terrifying. And I am feeling like I want to pull those covers over my head. And that's okay. And the
Mhm.
truth piece comes in with cultivating this internal environment where we can feel safe with ourselves. Because if I haven't built that up, then I'm going to show up truthfully and vulnerably to what? Be ridiculed or criticized or punished. um, when we're really building self trust, it requires reclaiming our internal landscape and attending to how we're talking to ourselves, especially when we're at our most vulnerable. Because
Mhm.
if I think about this relationship like with another person, I would never tell my deepest, darkest secrets to somebody who I was quite sure didn't really like me anyway, or I definitely knew was going to make fun of me. And so we do ourselves this disservice when we kind of demand, because it's like vulnerability is, so on trend right now, this truth telling. So we cannot expect ourselves to tell the truth if we are not simultaneously attending to how we are treating ourselves when we do tell the truth. And all of this is really important to building self-trust. So, you know, when I was talking before about my blood sugar really helps to tend to my internal chaos, one of those the ramifications of that is when I am not taking care of what I'm nourishing my body, getting enough rest, or drinking enough water, I'm mean to myself
Mhm.
unnecessarily. Everything feels scarier than it needs to. There's like a chaos of like, I'm tired, things are falling through my fingers, I have to get extra graspy, I don't really know, I feel scared. I am creating an internal condition where, and I have a lot of tools at this point, and it can still be hard to access. And so I think, especially when we're at the beginning, making sure we're attending to those foundations is really important. And that is associated with really cultivating an internal environment that is safe for telling ourselves the truth.
Mhm.
um, Getting support if you need it. It is amazing to have a container with a therapist or a friend or somebody to say, like, this is what I'm telling myself right now. Can
Mhm.
you reality check that with me? Because the more that we're able to be vulnerable with ourselves, the more that we're going to have the ability to be in that conversation of, okay, I'm pulling my blankets over my head. I have things I really need to do. I also feel scared. I'm also really tired. But, at what point, what's the point, right? Where I need to give myself like some more, I don't even want to call it tough love. I'm going to call it gentle discipline. Where I'm like, yeah, you're going to spend the morning in bed, but this afternoon you have a few things that you do need to do. Versus like, yeah, you really are needing to muck around right now, and it's inconvenient, and I wish it wasn't this way, and it's awkward, and you're gonna have to postpone or say no to some things or whatever it is. Like, this is the space you're in right now, and this is what you need.
Mhm.
But we're never gonna know um, we're never going to know really where we are or how to support ourselves if we aren't first fostering that internal environment to have it even be safe to tell ourselves the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I don't think I've shared this beyond my membership community, but I'm somebody that I think most people who come to my work would consider me pretty open and honest about life and hard things. And but vulnerability is one of my primary triggers to go, like it sends me into hyper arousal. And it's I'm doing a lot of work around that, and with my support system, and I loosely define freedom for myself as feeling safe and at home in my body and my life. And so I love how you've highlighted that sense of safety first. We have to find that sense of safety. We know this from trauma work and trauma research, that sense of safety is really crucial, but I don't think we always allow or form that connection to understand that we're not just talking about big T trauma. Like literally that sense of safety is always important. And so when we're constantly berating ourselves or punishing ourselves or comparing ourselves and trying to measure up, keep up, etc., we're lacking that sense of safety in our bodies and our lives. And that's the roots, I guess, right? Like I don't know how to envision that, but it's like it's essential. One way or another, it's essential to have that in order for us to flourish and grow. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed too, and I suspect you'll notice this, Mara, is that I have not yet met a woman who is too permissive with herself. So it doesn't mean she's always ultra productive. That's not what I'm talking about. She might even try to rest, but the inner dialogue is you should be up, blah, 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 like you're lazy, whatever. I have never once met a woman who really truly has to worry that if she offers herself too much self-compassion, like this will be problematic. No.
No. And I talked at the beginning about how I really believed I had been like so bought in to that conditioning that was like, this is how we do things. This is what it means to be an adult. I'm mean to myself to make myself do things I don't want to do because that's what has to be done in adulthood. Um, and I truly believed that if came to myself with some acceptance, and I see this all the time. People say, I can't accept myself because then I'm going to put a cap on my growth or I'm going to stagnate. Or, the only thing that's keeping me going are these ways that I've been abusing myself. And I have been pleasantly surprised to learn that I have natural enthusiasm and motivation, that when I am kind to myself, to earlier today, I was talking to one of my sisters and she was saying something like, oh, yeah, well, everyone needs the mean mommy. That's what gets you into action. I was like, that does not get me into action. Like, tough love does not work for me. What
Mhm.
works for me is being unconditionally regarded and believed in and supported, and having somebody be like, here, put your head in my lap and I just believe in you and I know you're going to be able to figure this out and I know you're going to be able to persevere and make this happen. I did not have that kind of mother. um I do not have that many people in my life I have, that I would have that kind of relationship with, and so my eternal work is being that person for myself
Yeah.
and really acknowledging like, wow, okay, I actually, when I am spoken to kindly, when I am, somebody is just, you know, slowing down and paying attention to me, like putting their phone down, looking at me in the face, listening to me, uh, I am then able to do so much more with such a deeper sense of ease and confidence than I was when I was scared and I was doing what I thought I should do, really, really fast so that I wouldn't be found out to be like the hack that, I secretly thought I was inside. And it was really scary to let that go and move into this place, because I had never seen it work before. I didn't actually even think it was possible for me. But part of doing this work for me is encouraging people to, that exists, right? You are a human with interests and excitement and natural motivation, and you may move differently or slowly or need different considerations or a different timetable or whatever it is, than you think that you should. But like, you can very much accept yourself and be kind to yourself and still get things done. And yeah, the more permissive that I am to myself, um, the better my life gets on every front, every
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, I would say the same. The meaner I was to myself, or my inner critic, it just exacerbated anxiety that I already lived with, and feelings of not being good enough, and all the noise. And then I wouldn't step out. I wouldn't risk. I wouldn't, because of course I didn't feel safe, right? So it actually held me back. And the more I learned to actually work with my wiring and honor the way I'm knit together and love myself well in every season, all of a sudden I was like, okay, I can do this hard thing that scares me. And so um so just as we yeah, okay. I have to decide. We're ending our time here. I don't think we're going to get to every question. I think I would like to ask you to describe a little bit what it means to belong to oneself first, for people who really aren't familiar with that idea. So, in a podcast episode with Sass Petherick, you said, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but you said, I'm not a particularly easy human and never have been. So, I actually would love if you'd share, what do you mean by that? And then and kind of help us have a deeper understanding of what it means to belong to oneself first.
Yeah, so what I mean by that, first of all, is that, I was raised on like this combination of romantic comedies and capitalism, and like what is good for a woman to be is really easy going. Like they just don't seem to be ruffled by anything. They always just kind of look put together and it's great, no problem, sure, rolling with the punches. I do not roll with punches. Um, the more I take care of myself, the more resilient I am in the face of changing circumstances, but I'm just not. I care about 100 times too much about everything. I have opinions that are fast takes all over the place. I just
Sorry, I want to hear the words that you said. You said, I have opinions that are
fast takes. Like I'm talking before I'm really thinking about
okay, okay,
whether or not that's a well-supported opinion.
okay.
Um, and yeah, so and I have a lot of needs, meaning over the course of the day, it's like I'm drinking my water and I have my tinctures and I've got vitamins and I'm like I have a ton of food allergies and y- y- it just I just am a high maintenance person. And for so much of my life, I was like, oh gosh, like don't be needy. That's bad. Like nobody loves a person who makes it so difficult to be around them because they have like all of these things that they need. And for me, belonging to myself has really been coming to terms with the fact that it's my own responsibility to take care of myself. And suddenly, it's like it's nobody's business how many vitamins I'm taking. Nobody's bothered by my water drinking regimen. No, I don't have to ask anybody's permission to speak to myself kindly in my head. You know, once I started taking responsibility and belonging to myself, meaning prioritizing my own needs, my own well-being, above making myself small to make other people comfortable around me, which, as a recovering people pleaser, this is super uncomfortable still, probably always. Um, but the more that I do it, the more space that I give myself, the more that I attend to what I require, then the more of myself that I have to bring to everything around me. And I had thought that it would be the opposite. I was like, this is, taking care of myself. It's like a full-time job. And it kind of is, but it doesn't feel heavy. It just feels like, oh, this is what makes me feel really good. And it's, you know, not actually that hard to pour myself a glass of water multiple times a day. And it's not actually that hard to, remember to take that tincture that really helps with my anxiety. And it's not really that hard to whatever it might be. But when I was really refusing to take responsibility for myself, I was always coming up against this. We're humans, we have needs. Not all of us have needs. It's not like some of, if we're more chill, it's because our needs are being met. And when there's that drama, it's because I don't want to meet my needs. Sometimes it's because I'm telling myself the story that you meeting my needs is what it means for you to love me, which can be particularly complicated. And that showed up in my relationship in a big way where I didn't want to ask for what I needed because that was like not cool and ladylike or chill. Um, but I needed what I needed. And now you aren't a mind reader. So you have no idea. And now I'm mad and I'm hurt because now I know that you don't love me because you didn't read my mind to know that I needed the thing that I wasn't willing to ask for. So belonging to myself has meant really owning and honoring what I need, giving myself what I need as often as possible. And
Mhm.
sometimes what I need is something that, comes from a relationship, or it's a boundary that I need to set or involves somebody else. And, I think about it kind of like what we have the capacity for, because sometimes we only have the capacity to be in that interface with ourselves, and setting a boundary with somebody else, or asking for what we need from somebody else might feel too high test, and that too is part of belonging to ourselves and being in relationship with ourselves, is knowing like, okay, I'm feeling more bold today, more resilient to you saying no to me, which is always an option. So being with yourself and conversing with yourself over the course of the day about how you feel and what you need, and what you have the capacity for, which I think that piece is really important too.
Yeah. And so, yeah, because it reminds me of permission, which we didn't get to, but that permission is so important because, like, even you mentioned boundaries, and I think a lot about that. Like, there are days where I'm like, the right thing for me is to, hey, be assertive and communicate something. And the right thing for me on another day, if a boundary somebody isn't respecting, is turn off social media, walk away and tend to myself, and not worry that I'm not using my voice in that moment because I'm
Mhm.
tending to me. It's like, there is no one, like, and I think that's where I really love these deeper conversations, because I think anything that really matters, they're like, I like to think in part like some things are not so complicated, but also I really think that most beautiful things have a lot of complexity.
Mhm.
Like, there's so many layers, and like, and I hate pat answers that dismiss human suffering or dismiss the reality that we're not living in a bubble. We're living in this constant, like, this dynamic ecosystem with other people and shifting needs and all of that. So anyway, thank you for being here. Um, Okay, what would you like to offer a final word of hope, encouragement, or invitation for people listening, who want to do deeper work around this idea of self-trust, or anything that you're excited about?
So I never actually answered that piece about beginning again, and so I'm going to bring it back up here,
Okay.
which is that, because I think it's so good. It's like, okay, whenever you realize that you're off the mark, or things are going awry, or you've been turning away from yourself and you want to be turning towards yourself, that moment of awareness is a great moment to start again. We bring so much heaviness to the idea of starting again because we say, what does it mean about me? Now I've relapsed in this way, or all of that, and we use our precious energy to beat ourselves up for being where we are, when we could instead take that energy and put it towards what it is that we're wanting. you know um for the last 4 days I've been eating food that makes me feel really bad in my body. Okay, well, this moment's another moment to start again. Or I've been in a relationship with this person for however many years. And that whole time, I have not been showing up as the true version of myself, or I've not been saying something that I need to say. Well, this moment, this moment, this moment, and not buying into that idea that, there's going to be a better time. Which doesn't mean that, you have the capacity for whatever it might be in that given moment, but not buying into that idea of, I'm going to wait till tomorrow. There's going to be a fresh slate. Or I'm cracking up because I'm seeing in my work a lot of people, it's like it's almost the summer solstice, but they're like, this year is basically over. No, there's 6 months left to this year. Don't write off 2021 just yet. But it's like we have that like fantastic relationship with January 1st, where the slate gets wiped clean and it's fresh and beautiful. And it's like, well, you know, this year's already in the bag. So I'm just gonna run it all the way down. And no, it's like you don't need a
Mhm.
fresh year, a fresh day, a fresh month, a fresh to-do list, a fresh whatever. You can choose to pivot and to realign, even ever so slightly, with yourself in every given moment, and
Yeah.
giving yourself that permission to not make a whole story about why that's necessary, but to just say, like, oh, I'm a little bit out of alignment here. And I'm going to make this slight pivot towards myself. Doesn't even have to be, it can be so slight. But, oh, it's 4 o'clock. I meant to drink water today. I haven't. Well, pour yourself a glass. Like 4 o'clock's as good a time as any to pour yourself a glass of water.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, giving yourself that permission to begin again in a way that's curious and not heavy-handed, and comes from that place of really wanting to support yourself.
Mhm. All right. Thanks again. So maraglatzel.com. And yeah, it was a delight to see you face to face and chat with you today.
Absolutely, for me too. Thank you for having me.